Jos was and is avoidable. Whatever happened in Jos was and is artificial. It's cooked up just by certain individuals, maybe for pure political ends. I won't even call it religious. I believe strongly that a lot of it is from political ends. But if I might stretch out to talk about some of the problems that spread out into the neighborhoods, not just the Jos metropolis, I would hasten to talk about environmental impact. Part of this problem is environmental impact, negative environmental impact. In the colonial days, Jos was home to major mining activity by the colonial masters. And they left in that trail huge mining ponds. And they claimed a lot of agricultural land from the natives and turned it into mining, areas. Unfortunately, this land was never reclaimed. And as population grew and exploded, which is a global phenomenon anyway, you found that there was demand for a lot of land for farming purposes and for settlement. Then, of course, desertification that is fast taking over most of the northern states like Kano, Sokoto, up to Bauchi, just around here, Kebbi, Zamfara, and all of that. Desertification taking over the states, little grass to feed upon by cattle, and the most important rural engagement and rural activities in these northern states is cattle rearing. And some of the ponds on the plateau collected a lot of water, and some of the mountainous areas on the plateau have a lot of lush grass that is extremely fantastic for the cattle. So when a Fulani herdsman leaves Kano or Sokoto along with his cattle, they starve. And the first point of contact for food and water is on the plateau. And mind you, I said already, population explosion, land is in shortage, agricultural land is in shortage, and as soon as these cattle arrive here, they're famished and they become rapacious. Anything they see in their sight, they like to eat, be it crops, agricultural, crops, or be it wild bush, be it whatever. And then, of course, it's ready-made water ponds. So they now get into contact with the natives. So that gives rise to serious conflict, very serious conflict. And when this happens in the bush, it spreads us out into the town. You find that the natives are fighting with the Fulanese, and it takes a religious coloration. And that spills over into the city. And then people take up arms and they start fighting and so on and so forth. So all sorts of things get adduced to the fight. And of course, the previous administration, the immediate past previous administration, just before David Jang came into power, did not do much by way of development. Did not do much by way of development. But when David Jang came along, he now started opening up the city. Started creating a lot of, highways, started building bridges, dualizing the roads, lighting up the streets, and of course, cleaning up all these places. And in the process, of course, there was need to demolish one or two buildings that were standing the way for overall, governmental reasons. Because if you have a house that is standing right in the middle of the street and I want to widen the street, the next thing to do is to pay you compensation, and then I demolish the building, and then I can now construct the highway. Some of these things didn't go down well, people, but naturally, it's not everyone that you carry along when you start the revolution. David Jang came with a major developmental revolution in this state, only akin to that of J.D. Gomwalk. And I believe, going back to the problem of cattle and the conflict between the cattle rearers and the natives, one of the ways is for the federal government to sit down with the government of Plateau State, and indeed the government of Benue State, because a similar problem is happening down in Benue State, where I originally came from, between the natives and the herdsmen. Open dialogue and try to carve out cattle highways, because everything has its own highway, has its own path. Even the plains, if you don't give them certain altitudes and latitudes up in the skies, nobody will ever fly. You take off, you just run into each other, and you perish all the passengers in a matter of seconds. And I believe strongly too that you can map out definitive ways and highways that this cattle must follow, and along go into agreement with these various governments and have what we call grazing pastures. So as the cattle travel along these designated highways, then they arrive at certain points where they feed heavily. And sometimes you can then come up with rail and carry them, and they do the rest of the journey, probably from Jos Township to Lagos by rail, after they must have fed and taken a lot of water. The rest of it, of course, sometimes you can put in the trucks, these huge trucks, they call them trailers, and then do the rest of the journey. So the cattle doesn't have to trek all the way from Sokoto to Lagos, and along with it doing a lot of damage. You have designated highways or pathways for this cattle. You then have definite pastures, and you can even import certain grass type that is very good for the cattle and that makes them grow fat very, very quickly. And then, of course, the Fulani herdsmen, if they fatten the cows, they sell them for better prices, they're happier people, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that are not being done, so that the cattle is left to wander everywhere without let or hindrance, without any control. And people are already environmentally impacted due to previous activities by the colonial masters in certain areas. And as population is exploding, there is a need, there's deficient need, land use. So as long as this is not addressed, so long will there be trouble. And as long as there is trouble in the bush, it spills into the cities. So it has nothing to do with David Jang. And I believe very strongly that given another 4 years, that David Jang has won his seat. Georgetown will be paradise on earth. It will be paradise on earth. It will attract a lot of foreign people because the peace will return. And I've also suggested that he should open up discussions with the federal government, call all the stakeholders. It is not as if the Plateau people do not welcome visitors. Yes, they welcome visitors, but as I've said, they're living with past misery caused by their own land, because there was a time it was the Plateau that provided all the foreign exchange that developed this country. It was the foreign exchange earned from the mining activity of Jos, of Plateau State, that developed the oil industry in the South. And along with it, left a lot of devastation. But we don't have a commission today that is to reclaim and ameliorate this past damage. Whereas in the South, you have the NDDC, you have all sorts of commissions that is trying to ameliorate the environmental damage that the gas exploration is bringing along. But here in the Plateau, there was no such a thing. So the people are grappling with it. And until we go back and set up commissions here, bring enough money to reclaim some of this land, and then to have pastures that will be cropped with very nice grass that is imported for the cattle to come and feed upon, and the railway is working, and the cattle, some of it is transported by rail, some of it by trailer, then you find that Jos will become a paradise. Everybody you can close your eyes and think of would want to come to Plateau State because the weather is right, the people are friendly, there's religious tolerance, and there's a good mix of various tribes that come from all parts of this country, some of who have been living here in the last 400 years without let or hindrance. So if the Plateau people were to fight visitors, it's not today that they would have started. They would have started right from when the visitors came. But some of them are here in their 4th or 5th generations. They don't even remember where they came from. There are some local governments here made up of, pure non-indigenous population, like Kanke, not Kanke, but Kanam, Wase, all this. These are non-indigenous populations with their own emirs.